What is your full name?
My name is Flora Abramson.
And was it changed when you came over here? Abramson or?
My Abramson is my married name. I was born Horowitz, and I was born in Milwaukee.
And when your family came over, was the name changed?
My father's name was not changed that I know of, though it could have been, because when we did some research on it, there are people with Horowitz, Gurowitz, different spellings from different parts of Europe. It's kind of interesting.
And do you know which part he came from?
My father came from Romania.
So, did your mother also come
My
from?
mother came from Poland, and her name, I think, was shortened. It was Stein, and I think it was shortened when she came over to this country.
From, do you know what it was?
Poland. Mm-hmm.
But do you know what Stein was shortened from?
No, I don't.
Okay. And when were you born?
I was born in 1931.
And who were your first family members to settle here? You said your mother and your father, and what brought them here?
Situation in Europe.
How did they make a living when they came?
It's kind of interesting. My mother was the oldest of the daughters that came, so she never ever learned to read or write English. She went right to work when she came. My father could not get into this country via the United States, so he came by way of South America and walked his way up to Milwaukee.
That's a long walk.
It's a long walk, and they both had relatives here, and that's how they got here. And my father went into the grocery business because that's what my mother's relative. He had met my mother at a dance for newcomers, and they went into the grocery business.
And what was it like for you growing up here?
It was wonderful. I mean, we had a good life. My father and mother owned grocery stores. At one point, we lived upstairs of one.
Did you work in the store?
Only under great duress when I was in high school. But yes, I did work in the grocery store for a while.
And what do you most remember about growing up?
I remember lots of things. Our house was open house to all the family, holidays. I had relatives who lived in Wisconsin, in northern Wisconsin, about 150 miles from here, which was a little far. So for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover, they would come to our house. And they had 3 children. And my aunt would come with a Nesco. I don't even know if you know what that is. It's a cooker. It's a cooker.
Uh-huh.
And she would come with her Nesco filled with her food. And my mother, they would each cook 2 complete meals. We used to just laugh. Instead of saying, what are you making, I'll make something else. They both cooked. But we used to sleep on the floor. And it was always good. Our house was always open. We lived in a neighborhood that was not a Jewish neighborhood, though. So I didn't go to the Steuben, which was the Jewish junior high school at that point. I went to Peckham. So I was kind of, the people would say, oh my goodness, you're a nice Jew. I mean, that kind of thing. We belonged to a synagogue, and we were very active there. And so I had always had a Jewish education. I was one of the first girls to graduate from Hebrew school at that time. Girls didn't really go 5 years to Hebrew school. I have 2 sisters, and I'm the middle child. And I used to have to do whatever they didn't do. That was kind of my goal in life, was to just kind of one-up them, I guess. I was always looking for a new challenge.
And at that time, if you finished Hebrew school, did that mean that you had a bat mitzvah, or was
We
that...
didn't have, there wasn't such a thing in that day. Girls were not bat mitzvahed at all. But I did go with the boys, and I went for 5 years, and we did have a Hebrew school graduation.
Were
So
there
that
other
was-
girls in the class?
I think there was one other girl at that time. Also, when we went to Sunday school, we had confirmation. So I had a lot of Jewish friends, and came from a very Jewish background. My parents spoke Yiddish most of the time in the house, which I never learned because I wanted them to speak English. This, to me, was, we were in America, and that was what they were supposed to do.
Was Romanian Polish different? Yiddish different from Polish Yiddish?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They're all different.
But they understood each other?
Oh, yes.
And were their grandparents also?
No.
They'd not come over?
The one-grandmother that came died before I was born.
Okay. And which synagogue was this?
Beth El near Talmud at that time.
Mm-hmm. And were you happy to be Jewish?
Yes. That was never a problem. You were always made to feel good about being Jewish.
What did you mean when you said that people thought you were a nice Jewish
Well, that
person?
was because I wasn't living in a Jewish neighborhood, and people didn't know many Jews, and they had a preconceived idea I think. You know, the kids, I mean, I'm talking children now,
Right.
you know, in junior high school especially, because when I went to high school, I went to Washington High School, which was a very Jewish high school.
So there was a perception among children that Jewish people weren't nice?
Right, right,
Okay.
or different,
Mhm.
maybe different would be the word.
So it was like you were a normal Jewish
Yes.
person? And so is this sort of a form of anti-Semitism? Were you aware
I
of other
suppose it was.
anti-Semitism?
No, I personally was not, but then I would be protected from that because that was my parents' style. We
Mhm.
wouldn't have known if there was anything going on.
How traditional was your Jewish?
Very
family?
traditional. My father had a grocery store, and he had to work on Saturdays because that was the busiest day of the week. But we used to laugh. He gave up smoking on Saturdays because he had to light a match, and that was one thing. You watch that, and you realize that the help in the store used to say, "Please smoke." He was miserable when he couldn't smoke, but that was his way of observing the Shabbat when he couldn't.
Close the store.
When he couldn't close the store. And in later years, when he retired, I think one of his biggest blessings was being able to go to the synagogue, and I saw that, and my kids saw that. The synagogue was very important to them. I was brought up, I'm laughing now, teachers and rabbis could do no wrong. That was it. That was a flat statement, and you couldn't complain because my parents valued education a great deal, and that was very important to them. And being in America, I remember saying to my mother one time, "Wouldn't you like to go back to Europe?" She said no. She had no desire. They didn't have good. They had a very anti-Semitic life. And she used to say, "You should go down outside every day and kiss the earth that you're here." So that's kind of their background.
Tell us about your involvement in agencies in the Jewish community and also in the general community.
Well, I have 3 children, and one of my earliest thinking when I was first married was I joined Hadassah. And Hadassah gave me a great education. It was really amazing what I learned. We would do American affairs and Israeli affairs, and we would hear about Israel. And so from young on, from when I was really very young, I was married at 19, Hadassah was one of those agencies that I was very active in that gave me a good background. And as my children got older, I became very involved in the synagogue. I served on the Board of Trustees. And at that point, there was a Board of Jewish Education, which today is CJL, kind of. But it was the citywide Board of Jewish Education, and I served on that. I did that as far as my volunteer work goes. And then when my children got older and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, I had my own business for 14 years. It was a weight loss business. And when I left that, I went into Jewish communal work. I worked at Jewish Family Services. I helped find jobs for newly arrived immigrants from the Soviet Union. And that probably was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It was fascinating. I met people that I never would have met before. I have a view of people. I mean, I saw my parents coming from Europe, and that was one thing. But these people came with an education my parents didn't have, came with an appreciation of culture. Buildings there, music that these people had had. And they were coming to America and would take any job. McDonald's was one of the first places that I was able to put people. I had people with master's degrees went to work at McDonald's because McDonald's, I don't know if you know this, but you can work at McDonald's and not speak English because they teach you with signs, so that you could just, it was pretty easy. And from there we would take people to get jobs, and the appreciation that people felt. They would work 2 jobs. Grandparents who were younger than I was at that time, because in Europe at 50, most people in Russia stopped working. So they'd live with the family and take care of the children, and both the couples would go to work. That was a fun job because it was meeting people and doing something that was wonderful. And from there, I was the executive director of the sesquicentennial celebration of the Jewish community. We celebrated 150 years in Milwaukee. And it was a real challenge, and it was real fun. We put on a concert with the symphony. we brought in Itzhak Perlman, and while we were negotiating this 2 weeks before the symphony went on strike, and the musicians signed something that they would cross the picket line because they wanted to play with Itzhak Perlman. But the union, the stagehands would not. So before the concert, I was taught how to turn the lights. I mean, I'm still laughing about it. How to turn the lights on and how to do the things in case they settled the strike before the concert. But we did all kinds of things to celebrate the sesquicentennial. We published a book. We had ballet. We had original ballet written. We had original play of the rep written. All the synagogues celebrated. We had things for kids. We had a year and a half of just wonderful, wonderful things going on in the city, and that was fun. And when I left there, when the sesquicentennial was over, I got a job as the executive director of the Pabst Mansion, which is a historical house museum in Milwaukee. And I worked there for 5 years, and that was also another learning experience for me, because that was the non-Jewish community. And giving was different, raising funds was different. People didn't have quite the same background of giving. And I knew nothing about historical houses, so I learned a great deal from that. It was really fun. That was a good time. And when I left there, I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I became the executive director of Keshet of Wisconsin. And Keshet provides Jewish education to special needs children, of which I had no background either. And I was the fundraiser and the executive director, but I learned a great deal. I learned to appreciate children who have needs, children who don't think they fit, and watching them fit into the community because the community decided that they should fit and get the same education that their siblings do. And I'm leaving that position tomorrow.
What will you be doing next?
Well, I am making a complete turnabout, and I have bought a knitting store. I'm going to become a proprietor. I'm going into retail. I have a knitting shop, of which I'm opening up probably in the next 2 weeks. So that's another new adventure for me. I've decided, I finally figured out that this is what I need. I need new challenges, and I keep finding something.
Is knitting a hobby that you've been involved
It's a hobby that I've had and that I've really liked. And I'm a very social person. I like people, and this is a real people business. And the opportunity came up, and my husband died almost 9 years ago. And so that's another, my children don't live in Milwaukee. My children are all over the United States. So I don't have that kind of an attachment here. So I guess I need to be busy. And my husband used to say that I had more guts than brains. And I can hear him saying it again, because I'm getting into something that I have to learn. I have a learning curve to go through now, because there's a lot more to knitting than I know, that I did and know how to do. But I want to do classes. I want to help teach. I need some people to work for me. And so it's going to be starting all over again. So that's kind of fun. And in between that, I've done some other volunteer work. One of the things that I kind of want to mention, because it's been a really important part of my life, was in the non-Jewish community. I've served at Washington High School on their scholarship committee, and they have a foundation where the school has changed so completely. When I went there, it was a excuse me, primarily a Jewish high school, and most of our parents were immigrants, and it probably had to be 90% college bound. I mean, that was just what it was. And then with the changing of the neighborhoods and everything else, it certainly has changed. And I've been serving on their scholarship committee because this is very important to help kids find themselves, and it's been another interesting learning curve. And the fascinating thing that's going on now is Washington High School has become a computer school. Of course, they've added a nursery since I've been there, which of course we didn't have when we went to school.
for children of students?
For children of students, yes. But not the majority. Many of the children are Asian, and have only been here a very short time. Their parents don't speak English, or they're living with a grandparent, and it's really fascinating. And these kids work hard, and they've really overcome so much personally that this is really rewarding. This is really a good part.
And how do you find fundraising for that?
Well, that is done through asks and through a luncheon that people have, and we've had some bequests left as people die, have left bequests to this foundation, so we can distribute funds.
And do you look to the Jewish community as well for funds?
We have looked to the entire community, absolutely, and especially alumni, which a majority of them are, and we have some real celebrities, we have that have graduated from Washington High School, so it's been kind of fun.
For example?
Bud Selig, Herb Cole, that group.
Right.
Jerry Silberman, trying to think of who else. There are lots and lots of people who are active in the Jewish community today here in Milwaukee, have graduated from Washington High School. And the other part of the non-Jewish community that I have tapped in and that has helped me a great deal is an organization of professional women, which are very few of us are Jewish in this for some reason. I don't know why. It's called Temple. And I have come in contact with women that I would have never met before from all walks of life. And they have been mentors, and they have really, when I've needed some fundraising, I can go to somebody at one of the big law firms or one of the accounting firms or the manufacturing, because I've met a lot of people that way that have really helped through my career, which is pretty amazing.
On a completely different subject.
Okay.
How do you connect to Israel?
Well, it's really interesting because my parents have always been supporters of Israel. I mean, I can remember when I was little, rabbis would come to the house, and my parents were not wealthy. But their contributions, my father would take this man from Israel who was asking for money. He had a list of people he was going to collect from. My father would take him around. I mean, my father would contribute what he could, but that was also his contribution. There was always somebody in the house that was asking for money. And then when we had never been to Israel, and one of my older daughters spent a year as a sabbatical in Israel, and had 2 children at the time. No, yes, she had 2 children and had her third while she was in Israel. So that was my first trip. I got a call on a Sunday and said, "I'm going into labor, will you come?" And went to Israel and stayed with the kids while she had her baby. And after that, my husband came and we toured, and we also took a tour with another couple that was wonderful. And so we really saw Israel from a couple of different ways. And then I have cousins who went to Israel before the war, and so they were very young. And so I got to visit them on their kibbutz, and one of them is a famous paper cutter. So I have an attachment, and I believe in Israel, and I know it has to be.
Do you still is your daughter still there?
No, they spent a year there. My daughter, that daughter is a cantor in New York. And they took a year sabbatical, and they spent a year on a kibbutz and came back. And yet that year was important to me because I learned I stayed on the kibbutz with them, and I saw how they lived on a kibbutz, and they go back often.
Are your other children also in Jewish endeavors?
Yes, they are. It's very interesting. My youngest child is in Arizona, and my children all have children, and she's involved in a synagogue singing. And when she went there, she decided she was going to go kind of incognito, and it was okay. And she goes to services every Saturday, and they have an early morning service. And they found her, and she leads service. I mean, she doesn't have any formal training, but they call on her to lead services. She's very involved in the Jewish community there. And interestingly enough, my middle child is a son who, how do I say this without sounding, he really believes everybody should believe in one God, and let's forget the rest of this stuff. He does not like formal Judaism. So I never knew what was going to happen, but he has 3 children now. and has given them a Jewish education. And we have never discussed it, but I could see he needed to do something to become part of, and he really dislikes formal Judaism. And so this year, he sang in the choir of his temple and played the drums. He's a professional man, and he likes to play the drums. And so that was a way of his becoming part of Judaism, and they become very involved in their temple, as all my kids have. And so their friends are Jewish as well as non-Jewish, but they've been involved in Judaism and Israel.
And where do they get their voice?
Not from me, which is fascinating, because I'm a monotone.
Okay.
And I will listen to my daughters sing, and I'll have to say, are they okay? They all sound beautiful to me. Everybody sounds great, so that's kind of nice, you know.
Was your husband a good singer?
Yes, my husband
Okay.
was a good singer, yes.
How do you see the present and future of the Milwaukee Jewish community?
I see it changing. I'm pleased to see younger people taking a much more involved part. I think that's wonderful. I think there's going to be a change in the way people donate money, because what I see with Keshet, which started with a group of parents who, the community said they couldn't afford Keshet, and the group of parents said, you can't say no to us. I mean, we're not going to say no, and so they started a grassroots organization. And I look at our donors today, and we have many, many donors who don't give to anything else, who Keshet is their thing, and I think that this is what people are going to do more. I think they're going to do more selecting where they want their dollars to go and watching what happens with their dollars rather than making it an overall. I mean, that's what I really think is going to happen in the future.
Do you think that will result in a decrease overall in the amount contributed, or
No.
do you think it'll be?
No, in fact, I think it could be more if people, because then what would happen would be people, and this is how it used to be, and I've seen the swing, and I think that it's all been good, but I think younger people today want a piece of the action, sort of. They want to serve on the boards of the different agencies. They want to see the growth and see where the money is going and what's being spent. And I think that's very positive.
So if they're invested, they're willing to spend more.
Yes, I think so.
Is there any lesson in life that you have learned that has carried you through?
I guess I really have to say, and people laugh at me because I'm 73 years old and I'm starting a new career. I mean, you know, but follow your dreams. I mean, everybody says to me they're afraid. How can you do all these different things? And I look and say, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to give this new venture of mine a year, and if it doesn't work out, then it won't, and it's okay. I just think you have to follow your dreams.
What are you most proud of?
My family. It's incredible. We had a family wedding 2 weeks ago, and I have 3 children and 8 grandchildren, and one is about to have a commitment ceremony, and they were all here, and we were all together, and it was fascinating because my grandchildren are the ages of 4 to 25, and to watch them together interact and love each other, and to watch my children and my in-law children like being together and just being able to sit around and talk. I knew I had it. That was it. Whatever, I mean, that to me was what it's all about.
Do you have a lot of opportunities to be with your family?
Well, what I've done in the past, I don't know what next year is going to be. I've always been able to, since my husband died, I've always been able to get to each of them twice a year, and then they get here. I try to make sure they get here twice a year. The last time we all stayed at the Pfister. So what's going to happen, I don't know. We'll see. But I'll get there. I go for long weekends. I don't go for any lengthy time because I'm staying with them. And you don't want to stay at their house too long. Long weekends are fine. And so that's what I've been trying to do, and I hope to do, to continue.
And you have good relations with the respective in-law?
Yes, they were all here, and they came to see my new store. My sons-in-law thought I was nuts. I mean, they're looking at me saying, what do you want this for? But my daughters and my daughter-in-law were really, and my son too, gave some real good input to what I was doing and help. And my daughter-in-law has been really cute. She's emailed me twice now. She's a knitter. And she said, you want me to knit you some scarves that you can use for samples? You know, that kind of thing. So they're all very supportive, and yes, we have a really good relationship.
And you're supportive of the commitment ceremony and.
Yes, I am. Yes, this, you picked up on that. That's interesting. And that's another whole thing for my generation, to watch and to see. But I see that my granddaughter has someone who loves her and who she loves. And that to me is very important. Because that she's, you know, if she were 17, I might wonder about it. But she's 25, she's finishing her master's degree, she's been working, she's a wonderful human being. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be next June. And
Would it be a Jewish ceremony?
yes, it will be a Jewish ceremony, I think. But neither her father nor her mother, my daughter is divorced, and her father is a rabbi. My granddaughter's father is a rabbi, and my daughter is a cantor. And they're both in the conservative movement, and neither one can participate in the ceremony.
Oh.
They might lose their jobs if they do. But there's a really good friend that's going to do this. I mean, they're both very supportive of it. And there's a very good friend that will do the ceremony. So it'll be another experience for me, I'll tell you.
Wonderful. Do you have any regrets?
No, I don't think so. I think I've lived my life pretty much the way we've wanted to while my husband was alive. And that's the other thing we did. We really lived very well. We lived within what we had, but we did a lot of things together and had a really good life. And we were never big savers. That's another reason I'm working. But we did have the life together, so that I have no regrets with that either.
Have you become a saver?
No. My children are all, I tease them. They're all earn very nice livings. They're living very well. In fact, I got offers from two of them for this business and said, do you need any money? Which of course made me smile. But no, I'm still not a saver. I may regret it someday, but I'll be, what's the difference at that point? I'm healthy and I'm well, and I enjoyed my life.
What are some of the activities that you enjoyed doing with your husband?
We traveled a lot, and that was always really, really wonderful. He was a jock. He liked to play racquetball. He was a sports, I'm listening to what's going on today with the baseball and the Packers last Sunday, and I'm just laughing because that was my life at one time, was involved with that. I have no regrets giving that up.
Where did you travel?
We were in Israel, we were in Europe. We did a lot of traveling in the United States.
And what did he do for a living?
He was an insurance salesman.
And did you have a good marriage?
Yes. He didn't have much of a Jewish background. That was interesting. The first time we went to Israel, I will never forget it. He looked at the Jordan River and he said, what is everybody fighting about? Nothing here. And then the whole country said, there's nothing here but rocks. When you look at Israel, he said, what does anybody want it for? And then, of course, he became he didn't want to go. He had no desire to go to Israel the first time. But then when the baby was born, he knew, he wanted to see the baby. He became a believer also. He was pretty much the kind of person who was very content with his life. And I don't know how to say this without it sounding awful, but he let me be me.
That's wonderful. What's awful about that?
Well, I don't know, but he really, people wouldn't believe that he really ruled the roost. But he never had a lot of wants, so he didn't care. And so I was able to do what I wanted to do long before women were able to do that. And so
What were some of the things you wanted to do that you didn't mind?
It was when I started my own business. I got a better story. I love telling this one. We bought a condominium before anyone bought a condominium. And the reason we did is we lived in a small house and we needed a new refrigerator. The refrigerator wouldn't fit in the kitchen, and we were going to have to build onto the house, which we could have used some more room anyway, and for the refrigerator. And I said to him one day, why are we doing this? And went to look, and we bought a condominium when people said, why are you buying this? I mean, this is never going to go.
In Mequon or? In
Mequon. And so, and he wasn't real in favor of that. But I had convinced him that that's what we should do. And he went along with most of it, if I could convince him and show him.
And you were right.
And I was right.
Is there something about yourself that no one knows?
I don't think so. I saw that question. I saw some of the questions you were going to ask me, and I saw that one and I laughed. As you can hear me talk, you pretty well know what I think and what I do, and most people do. I don't beat around the bush. I'm provocative sometimes. I say what, you always know where you stand with me. And I don't know if there's anything that people, about me that people don't know.
How would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as a good mother, grandmother. That's all I really need. The rest of this is all just frosting on the cake. The things that I've done are the things that I've been don't really make much difference. It makes me feel good when people will say to me, you've inspired me, or you're changing careers makes me, that's nice. I like to hear that, and that's good. But there aren't many people that are going to do it anyway if it's not in them. People don't like to change, and I like change, I've decided.
Did you try to be the kind of mother your mother was, or did you try not?
That's really an interesting question. I don't know if I purposely tried, but it's really interesting how many of the things that you see you have in you that your mother has. And my mother was a wonderful woman, and one of the best compliments I had, one of my sisters said to me, "You're more like Mother than anybody." And that was a compliment, because my mother and father were both two very, very special people. And one of the things that I'll never forget, my father worked very hard, and at a grocery store with long hours, and he was very good. And after they both died, my two sisters and I had a discussion one time, who was Daddy's favorite? And the funniest thing was, each of us felt we were the favorite. And I said, can you imagine being able to make 3 children feel that special? So that was kind of the background that I had. That was kind of the feelings that way I grew up. And I don't know if I emulated them or not, but I certainly would have liked to. I certainly hope that I've done some of it, because they were kind of people that, they weren't famous, and they weren't anything that a lot of people would know, but they were wonderful parents, grandparents. My children have wonderful memories of their, I'll give you an example. I told you my parents were religious, and Passover in those days was all in Hebrew. When you did Seder, it was all in Hebrew. You're probably too young to know. The Maxwell House Coffee had a Haggadah that was all in Hebrew, and you sat there and you really weren't following if you didn't know it. And my kids, my sisters and I each have 3 children, and so there were a lot of little kids around, and they were under the table, and we were really, I can remember my father was doing the Seder. They should all be still. And he stopped, he looked up, and he looked under the table at whoever was doing it. He said, "It's okay, your parents weren't any better than that when they were little." So that was the kind of thing, you never had to be afraid. So it was a good upbringing, and Milwaukee was a good place to be. My parents, were very successful. And one of the associations that I remember also that I was thinking about was my parents belonged to the Milwaukee Jewish Grocers Association. And that was really interesting. They would have picnics and they would have parties, and these men of all the same era would be there and would be together. And so these people were all, you met a lot of interesting people whose fathers were in the same business that you were in too.
Was the store Jewish?
No, not at all.
Did
And it was never
carry
even a
kosher?
Jewish, no. Not ever. There were no kosher foods. There were none of that. Though my parents kept kosher. I mean, they did do all those things, but no, the stores were never. Though they never had, I can't remember if they ever had meat. I don't think they ever had meat, now that you say that. That's interesting. Yeah, they never had meat.
Because they were in a neighborhood that was not Jewish? Is that why?
I don't know. I wonder. I don't know why they didn't. And maybe it was the refrigeration. Maybe it was that cost. There could be a lot of reasons. I can remember There was a snowstorm in Milwaukee in 1947. It was the big snowstorm. That's when Milwaukee finally got their snow plowing equipment. Up until then, we didn't have any. And so my sister ended up sleeping on a streetcar. Everything was closed, but my father walked to the grocery store, and it was about 3 miles through the snow because he knew his customers needed milk for their babies. And so that was the kind of thing that I saw. As I say, it was nothing big, but you saw that.
So the grocery store stayed in the same place? You used to live over it and then you
No, that was a
moved,
different
or-
grocery store. He had several during his life. He had, well, 3 that I can think of, 4, several during his life.
And he moved as neighborhoods changed?
I don't know why they moved. Now, that's a good question. I don't know. Probably. That's probably a good point.
When you said earlier that you slept on the floor, was that only when your cousins visited?
only
because
when-
there were
oh,
not
yes.
enough beds?
You're right, but we did live in and we lived in a 3-bedroom house. I mean, I always shared a bedroom. Until my husband died, I never had my own room. I mean, I used to laugh about it. I shared a bedroom with my younger sister, but we had a 3-bedroom house. And we were comfortable. There was a maid in the house for years because my mother was in the grocery store, and she wanted to be sure there was someone there after school when we came home. I mean, so when I think about now the things that they did to be sure that we were taken care of, and my mother worked in the store along with my dad.
Did she learn English?
No, she spoke English, but she never, and you would never know, by the way, that she couldn't read or write. She would listen to the radio, and she was up on all the news. I mean, she could do numbers, and do numbers well. But she would be up on all the news because she knew that. I can remember when she applied for citizenship, we were in grade school, and we had a teacher that pledged the flag. I mean, those kinds of things in order to be part of the community and be part of the country.
And your father knew English?
Yes, my father had studied and learned to read and write English. But both of them had done this in Europe. In fact, interesting is that when my dad died young, and when my mother was in her 80s, she went to the Jewish home. And one of the things there that she enjoyed the most, I think they still do it. There are 2 women that come in and give book reviews. And my mother hadn't read a book in 60 years. And so she didn't care what they reviewed. It didn't make any difference. She would listen and love that part. In fact, I had a chance to tell one of the women I met and told her how important it was to my mother at the time. You know, volunteers don't realize sometimes. I think they do things, and after a while you don't realize what you do, but that's one of the things that they did.
That really matters.
Yes, yes. And I belong, I'm just thinking now when you're doing oral history, I belong to a Jewish sorority in high school. I don't know if anyone's talked to you about that yet. When I was in high school, there were Jewish sororities and fraternities. Oh, I mean, it was big time stuff. And you've got some pictures out there. And actually, that was probably some of those friendships I still have. We've been friends for 50, 60 years, some of us, that we had met through the sorority. And we really didn't do much except social, but it was a social outlet. It was before BBG or before any of those things that are around now. And though we were terrible, we actually blackballed people. I mean, they ended up getting thrown out, that they couldn't have them anymore. But we had formal dances in high school. I mean, we did that kind of thing, and that was a Jewish outlet. And I know that my husband, I shouldn't say that, he was in AZA, did all the sports with AZA, and that was going on at that time too.
How did you meet your husband?
High school. He sat behind me in a study hall. I was married at 19.
Did you finish high school?
Oh, yes.
Did either of you go to college?
Yes, we both did. He dropped off after 2 years, and I had 2 years, and then I went back as an adult. I've never finished. And you know what? If you ask me something I'd like to do, that's what I would like to do.
What would you like to do?
Yeah, I'd like to be a lawyer. And I hear you're a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer.
I've always
You
said
can do it too.
Yes, I probably could. I have forgot
Follow
about
your
that
dreams.
one. Forgot about that
Who
one.
told me that?
Yeah. I never did finish, but I went back to school as an adult, and that was really fun. My kids were little, and every course I took, I changed what I wanted to be. But I can remember taking Psych 101, and I'm thinking, gosh, I'm glad I took this after my kids were a little older. I would have been crazy otherwise. So I enjoy learning.
so maybe in a year after you've got your knitting set
Yeah,
up.
maybe I'll go back to school. That's a good idea. I really would like to at least audit some classes. I hear that people are doing that now, and they've got some really good things that they're auditing for senior citizens.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty well hit everything.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think the project is wonderful, and I'm really glad the community is doing it. I think it'll be wonderful when it's done. Thank you.